what are some tips or biggest lessons learned that you can share with people who are trying to get their foot in the door in the multifamily space?
The first thing people should learn is underwriting. You actually don't have to be really, you have to understand how the numbers work and how people make money in this business. The second piece, which is probably even more important though, is just networking.
Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe. Very excited for today's show. It's a unique episode. We just have one person on the line with us today. We got David Weinstock with us. So Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian, for having me. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun with this. So let's start out by talking about you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, goodness. I took a pretty winding course to real estate. First, I'm a resident of the Boston, Massachusetts area. This is where I lived. I spent most of my working years before real estate living off planes, trains, and automobiles as a consultant.
Yeah.
So I spent a year in Texas, Chicago, West Coast, New Jersey, you name it. I've been there. I've seen a lot of hotels, a lot of airports, and probably not a lot of what else that was there. I started as a startup guy in technology consulting.
Nice. So getting from technology consulting and flying all around, what was the trigger or what was the moment that made you realize that you wanted to start in real estate investing?
I always liked real estate and I always wanted to get in real estate. And I actually have a story early on in my technology career where I was an accidental investor and landlord. And so in my 20s, in one of my first startup jobs, I was flying everywhere. And, at one point I was renting a couch from a friend of mine because I was never home. Yeah. And I got tired of paying rent to other people and I wanted to buy an apartment. So I wanted to buy a condo because Boston has, 2, 3, 4 family buildings and they were converting to condos. So I wanted to buy a condo so I would have something to call my own and I'd get a roommate and be fine. I happened to be playing poker with a bunch of guys and I was the young guy in the crowd. Everyone was 10 years older than me. And one of the guys was a mortgage broker. And so he, of course, volunteered, "Oh, Dave, you're interested in getting a place? Let me do a pre-approval for you." And so I gave him an address and I was looking at a condo and he gave me 2 pre-approval letters, one for the building and one for the condo. And I thought he made a mistake. I said, "Oh, I really appreciate this, but I think you made a mistake. You gave me one for the whole building. You could buy either if you wanted to." I'm like, wait, what? And so I have enough gray hair. So this is pre-bigger pockets. I didn't understand the whole house hacking or the Burr method or any of that stuff. But, the wheels started grinding and I really like numbers. And I said, so I can basically buy a 2-family and have tenants live there and a roommate. And that will be cheaper than me buying my own condo. And the light bulb went off. And so I actually was really into the investing in my early 20s. The problem is I didn't understand this concept of the Burr method because it wasn't coined at this point. So I was really good about buying it and renovating it. I had a college roommate moved in. We renovated it ourselves. Top unit got too nice. I said, "Hey, we're going to move downstairs and we'll rent out the upstairs." We did it down below. And then at the end of that, I said, "Hey, I'm going to go buy another house." And he said, "Good luck with that." And he didn't want to go on that journey. I think I burned him out. But that point of like refinance and repeat, which is what's the really powerful part of that Burr model, was completely lost on me. And I was working on startups and my full career in consulting. So I got headhunted out of college and I was in employee number 300. I jumped to another one. I was employee number 150. I jumped to another one. I was employee number 50 until it was me and 3 guys in the room. And we started our own company. So I had known real estate was interesting and I knew that the numbers worked, but I just couldn't figure out how to buy more than 1 or 2. I just couldn't get enough of the down payment and I was, living life,
Yeah. I would drive by. I remember the road to get to my in-laws' house. There was a bunch of duplexes on the road that we would travel on. And I remember passing by those and thinking, man, I wish I could just buy a duplex. I wish it was as big as I could think of at the time. And similar to you, I bought a couple of houses and it was working, but I couldn't figure out how to do the refinance. I couldn't figure out how to scale it. It was just wait till I have enough money to put another chunk down and buy another one. And sometimes that was, a long time between deals, but yeah, so cool.
I think slow and steady works for some people.
Yeah.
But then you realize that it doesn't have to be slow and steady. And like thinking about just your own capital or just waiting to save up can actually be limiting if you want to take that route as a full-time endeavor.
Yeah. So when did that moment come for you where you wanted to start scaling, you want to start doing bigger things with real estate?
It's funny. I mentioned before I'd done a startup, and when we sold the startup to private equity, they rolled up a bunch of companies and said, hey, we'd really like you to travel again. Do you want to get on the road? And I just got married and had a kid. And I said, that'd be great for somebody else. I don't want to do that anymore. And I left. I went to corporate America for a few years, and then that wasn't fun for me anymore. And so when I left corporate America, I didn't really know about scaling or what I wanted to do. I just kind of jumped out and I became a developer. Actually, I started doing condo conversions myself, trying to figure out what would I do for my next job. But then I started really loving the development side of it.
Yeah.
But scale took me a while. I really have to be honest, scale took me a while. I was learning my craft and took the long path because I started doing condo conversions, then I did ground up infill in the city, then I started doing subdivisions. Then I started doing adaptive reuse and deep value add apartments. It was only about 3 years ago. So I've been out of the corporate world for 8 years, but it's only about 3 years ago that I actually said, I have friends and family that always would want to toss in a couple of dollars to what I'm doing. So I'd use almost all my funds and say, oh, I'm a little short for this. And do you want to come on in this one? You want to come in this one? And it took a while for the light bulb to go off that I was providing opportunities that they didn't have access to. And they were providing capital to get a higher return than they were getting in a bank account or getting it wiped out in the stock market. And so about 3 years ago, also when COVID hit. So it was a weird time to be starting out, but that's when I started beginning to scale. And I had to learn a little bit, had to, start building the network. But that's really the light bulb for me. And now I'm joint venture on things, I'm syndicating things and kind of leading deals. And I'm in the process of launching a fund.
Awesome.
So I'm trying to get all those things out there because, for me, it's about finding those opportunities and helping people scale. And I'm a believer that you can lift all boats at once if you're helping the right players. So that's the plan. That's how I found scale.
Awesome. So you specifically mentioned 3 things. Well, I mean, I had a conversation, yesterday with somebody else, and I'm at 1,000 units trying to scale. And, somebody looked at me and said, I'd love to be where you are. I would consider myself scaled when I get to where you're at, and yeah, I think I'm also looking for scale here. But
isn't that funny? It is all perspective. And I think for anyone watching this is all about the journey, enjoying the process of where we're going. And it just becomes additive. I mean, just by being in the business and doing more, you scale, and it gets easier because the processes are in place, the network is in place. But whether you have a single duplex and it's $100,000 or you've got $1 billion under management, like everybody's still looking and wants to continue going.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a great industry.
Yeah. And I'm having fun still. I mean, that's part of it, is I do enjoy what I do, and I enjoy helping others to get into the game and do what they want to do. So I'm going to go back to a previous comment you made. You mentioned, you syndicate, you sponsor deals, you do JV, and you're starting a fund. So if you don't mind, let's talk about each one of those and maybe discuss what you're doing in each of those areas. And let's just go from there. So syndicating, JV, and starting a fund.
Yeah. So let me go back. So I was buying deals predominantly with myself. Like I was providing the majority of the capital and I was doing the majority of the work. And so I would have small joint ventures with people coming in and then starting to meet some people that were a little more of an active roll your, sleeves up a little bit. And so we would start dividing the tasks. So we would take on, some smaller portfolios, 20 units here or 50 units here, and get 1 or 2 people that we would all share both the equity and the management side of it. So a lot of good, conversations, etc. But that only works with the right partners at the right time in the right place. Because capital, your personal capital is finite. When you open it up to others, it's more just how many investors do you want to try and find, or how many relationships for the size of deal you want. They don't necessarily want or have the time and effort to have a seat at the table. So joint ventures for kind of my active participants and the folks that have known me for a while and want to roll their sleeves up a little bit. And those are good for, certain things. Syndications So places where honestly the capital is either bigger than a single check we want to write, or we want to do multiple projects, or it's a capability where we have a local partner that is local to the area, and I want to help put the deal together, but I don't have all the capital to do it. So we'll syndicate it out and get anywhere from 5 to 20 investors is the typical pool of folks we need, and put the deal together and run it a little more professionally, so to speak. More reporting, a little more rigor than the joint venture where everyone's already in the room together. And then the last piece on the fund, honestly, this is a way to diversify. So similar to you, I meet a lot of really interesting people, and there's people not quite to where I'm at today, and people that are way beyond where I'm at today. And I figure what I'm really good about doing right now is I'm meeting more and more people who are looking for investment opportunities. But as you know, to find a good opportunity and for your standards takes a lot of time and effort. And so it's not like you got 5 deals every month that you can always be blasting out to people. You're very selective, right? And so I figured the fund allows me to offer diversified options to people that it's different return profile than my own deals. But for people who are looking to deploy capital, looking for more opportunities, I can give them access to those things. So I've been able to get some relationships with some much larger sponsors that have, literally almost $1 billion under management, that are doing things at such a higher scale in lots of different markets. So I'm focused primarily in the Carolinas and kind of the Atlanta metro and Georgia areas, where the fund allows more geographic diversity as well as the asset class.
Awesome.
So choose your own adventure, really.
And it sounds like what I'm doing, actually. I've done a couple of JVs. We're open to more JVs. I am, be looking for deals as lead sponsors now. And I also have my own fund, so take advantage of a couple of opportunities and diversification when and where I can. I think it's like natural progression after you start getting in. Well, for me, it seemed natural. But so you mentioned, the Southeast, and before we started recording, you said you were in Charlotte looking at deals. Tell me why Southeast, and what type of stuff are you looking for there?
Yeah, so there's 2 reasons for kind of the Southeast and the areas I'm in. First, I told you a very logistical reason. As much as I love partnerships, I'm still a very type A personality. And so I like to be able to visit assets. I like to be there for the due diligence and help to find them, even though I want a local boots on the ground partner in whatever area I'm working in. And so I pick metros that I can get on a plane that morning, visit for the day, and still get home that night. And after, 15 years as a consultant on planes and trains, 2 to 3 hours is a very easy hop and a commute. And that gives me access from Boston to, Atlanta markets and up and down, and East Coast markets up and down, and a little bit of that Southeast belt. I'm not opposed to markets on the West Coast and the Midwest, but it's a farther commute for me. It's not something that I'm as, familiar with. So that would be a harder stretch. But for my diversified fund, you find people that are operating at scale. It's an easier piece to do. In addition to trying to pick a place where it was easy to commute back and forth on the plane, the economics in both like the Charlotte and the Carolina markets, as well as the Atlanta markets, we're lifting all boats. I mean, the population growth is higher in those areas. The economic growth is higher in those areas. Average rent growth is higher in those areas. And they have large enough cities that they're being fed into. So, I think I may have mentioned before, I'm actually not that great at this game, and I'm not that smart. But what I am is finding places where all boats are lifting, finding a deal that is pretty good, or a good deal, and then making sure I can execute, both for our general partnership team and our investors. And so being in areas that have that economic growth engine behind them just allow everybody to do well. And I think it takes a bit of the risk out of it, because you don't want to own 10% of the market in a small town that may be eroding jobs or have one major employer that leaves. And I know that's different than folks that do student housing, but a college tends not to go out of business or move their operations overnight. Whereas we do see manufacturing and other things that has shifted over time. So I like diversity of employers, diversity of the, types of people living there.
Yeah, and I look at the same things. I mean, I spent a lot of time in the military, and I've seen these, towns that are adjacent to military bases, and 80% of the employment is from that base. And when personnel strength goes down, those towns tank. And so you mentioned diversity of the job market. I think that's huge. And something that I use this as an analogy a lot is just a sailboat analogy. If the boat's your multifamily investment, you got winds and you've got currents, and those come from the markets that you're in. If the wind is blowing the direction you want to go in the market you're in, it's a lot easier to get your boat where you want it to go. But
For sure.
yeah. So, well, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
One thing I wanted to add is, I'm, in addition to the markets, I'm a bit of a housing geek. So
Mhm.
because I come as a developer first,
Mhm.
I do a lot of studying about housing metrics and, housing shortages and then
Mhm.
types of folks there. So like that also is one of those things. So you look at the market and we just don't have enough places for people to live.
Yeah.
And so I look to areas if they're going to be saturated or not, and if they're building fast enough, because I will make the one counterpoint. I'll do it to Charlotte, where I just came back from. They're growing like gangbusters, but they're also building like gangbusters.
Yeah.
So investing in those markets, I'm always about, are you in the right path of progress? Are you
Mhm.
too far ahead of it? There's a lot of nuance to the local markets
Yep.
that still matter, even if you're in a growing metro where all boats are lifting.
Yeah.
So that's my only little caveat there.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I was looking at the forecast for Salt Lake specifically because that's where I'm focused. And they're going to have a record year in deliveries, this year and next year. And a study that the University of Utah put out said that they're going to get absorbed so fast that it's not even going to put a blip on the radar. I mean, they said the market vacancy is going to go from 2 point something to 3 point something. And so they basically said, yeah, we're getting record deliveries 2 years in a row, but we're still lagging behind the growth is what the
Yeah.
report said. So, I mean, for me, that's an indicator that things are going to do extremely well, growing like gangbusters, building like gangbusters, which trend is the stronger one, and where's the biggest supply and demand imbalance is one thing I love looking at.
Yeah.
So
I'm in agreement for sure.
cool. All right. So questions here now. So talking to the aspiring investors that listen to the show. All right. What are some biggest tips or biggest lessons learned that you can share with people who are trying to get their foot in the door in the multifamily space?
The first thing people should learn is underwriting. You actually don't have to be really, you have to understand how the numbers work and how people make money in this business.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the first piece. The second piece, which is probably even more important though, is just networking. Being in the room, raising your hand, putting yourself out there to learn, to be active, to do it. And then I think the third, I'm the worst person to talk about scaling because it's taken me so long to get traction under it. And I'm a type A that needs
Yep.
to touch it, feel it, and do these things. But I think in the day and age of the internet, and there's so many great groups online, and there's podcasts like yours where people can learn, get that education, and you can leapfrog. You don't have to start. You can start with a duplex and house hack it, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
You can band together with a couple of guys and buy something of a moderate size, or go with a bigger group and just take a small piece of that to learn the ropes. But really, I mean, this is such a great time for someone to be getting started now. A truly great time to do so. I know the economics are a little bit strange as we might, toe in and out of recession, but there are deals all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just, if you are looking for the deal and you're ready for the opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I think being ready for the opportunities is big, and something that I've noticed recently, I mentioned to you before we do this, I look for opportunities as key principles. We've had a lot of people bring us deals, and I think part of the readiness is, a lot of people don't have the finances to be able to pay that earnest money deposit, and that's kind of one of the things that I've been seeing a lot is, you have to be ready to take advantage of the opportunities. But the other part that you mentioned is kind of the answer to that already is network, get in rooms with a lot of other people, and you can probably find somebody who'll take care of that in exchange for, a certain portion of the deal.
Yeah, there's the scale of these deals, no matter if it's 12 units or 200 units or 2,000 units, there's room to share. And if anything, this is such a team sport. Like going at it alone, is a recipe for, a panic attack and not being able to deliver, really. The more you can share the load, the better. And you find you might gravitate more towards one side of the business or the other. But to your point on being ready for the opportunity, whether you're a KP, et cetera, that's the thing. Get in the room, network with folks, figure out what people are comfortable doing or who you can call on your Rolodex. As the Rolodex grows, so does your capacity for the types of deals you do.
Absolutely. Well, cool. I think we're at a good stopping point. A lot of good advice shared. I very much appreciate that. Thanks for sharing your story as well. So one last question for you. How can listeners learn more about you?
Fabulous. They can contact me directly at www.investwithdw.com.
Okay.
That's my contact card. I'll also leave them to my actual home website, DW Capital LLC. But yeah, I love meeting with folks. Feel free to reach out if you want to talk about opportunities. We've got some educational pieces as well. And that's the best way to do it. Brian, thank you so much for having me on here. And, I'm just honored to be among your guests. I know you've had some really wonderful folks, and you'll continue to do so. So I love your podcast.
You're one more wonderful folk is that wonderful folk? Can you do that singular? You get what I'm saying. But thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Hey, if you like that episode, make sure to subscribe. But more importantly, if you haven't joined our multifamily educational community yet, which we call the Tribe of Titans, you are missing out. Get 30 days free by clicking the link in the description to this episode, or go to thetribeoftitans.info, and we'll see you there.